I buried my wife just a week ago, and that's when my son and his wife came after me, demanding the deed to my $1.8 million home. I was broken, grieving, too weak to fight back. But while sorting through her old things, I found a sealed wooden box with a secret so devastating it could ruin them both. You won't believe the betrayal I uncovered next. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from in the comments. I sat there in the quiet of my living room, staring at the same walls that had watched me raise a boy into a man. Memories came rushing back, and with them came a sting so sharp it felt like a blade cutting straight through me. I thought about the years I spent giving everything I had to my son, Michael. I paid nearly $40,000 for his college tuition so he could walk across that stage and grab a diploma with pride. I bought him a used Ford for $15,000 so he wouldn't have to take the bus to his first job. I took on extra shifts at the plant, nights that left my back aching, my eyes bloodshot, and my body craving sleep. Every penny, every sacrifice, I told myself it was worth it because I wanted my boy to have more than I ever did. And it wasn't only the money, it was the quiet sacrifices, the ones no one sees. I remember skipping dinner sometimes, settling for beans on toast while he sat in the kitchen eating steak that I bought for him. I remember turning down a fishing trip with friends because I had to save for his textbooks. I even let go of a dream I had carried since I was a young man, a cross-country road trip with Mary, my late wife. We planned it for years, dreamed of driving Route 66, stopping at little diners and motels along the way. But when Michael needed braces, that trip vanished in a heartbeat. We told ourselves we could take it later, but later never came. Mary left this world before we ever touched that highway, and I can never get that time back. And now, to stand in the wreckage of all those sacrifices and see my son's loyalty bought and sold by Rachel and her father Harold, it tears at me. The weight of it presses on my chest until I can hardly breathe. I gave him everything I could, but it feels like he has given me back nothing but betrayal. I turned my eyes to the house around me. This place is worth nearly $1.8 million if a realtor came tomorrow. But to me, it's worth more than any number on a contract. This house is my life's work. Mary and I built it piece by piece. I still remember when we planted that Christmas tree in the front yard, just a tiny sapling at the time. Michael was 5 years old, holding my hand as I lowered it into the soil. Today, it towers over the house, a silent witness to everything we've been through. The walls hold more than paint. They hold laughter and tears. They hold the smell of Mary's pies cooling on the counter every Thanksgiving. They hold Michael's scribbled drawings pinned to the fridge, his report cards taped proudly by the door. And yet, standing here now, all I see is the shadow of greed creeping over it. The family room where we once celebrated birthdays is now the place where Rachel whispers about selling this home and shipping me off to a nursing facility. I can almost hear her voice echoing in my ears, dripping with entitlement. It's better if we handle everything. You can't manage anymore. The thought of losing this home, this legacy, is like losing Mary all over again. She and I built our lives here, brick by brick, memory by memory. To have it snatched away by people who see only dollar signs, it burns deeper than words can express. And it's not just the house, it's the bakery business, the family name tied up in recipes passed down from Mary's mother. That bakery once kept the lights on and put food on our table. To me, it's more than ovens and flour. It's a tradition. It's the beating heart of who we are. And now, that, too, is being dangled in front of greedy hands. It was in the middle of cleaning Mary's closet that everything changed. I wasn't looking for secrets. I was just looking for her scent, some trace of her left behind in the folds of a sweater or the corner of a scarf. But then my hand brushed against something solid tucked in the back, under old quilts. A wooden box small, worn, with scratches across the lid. My heart slowed as I pulled it out, like I had found a relic that wasn't meant to be disturbed. Inside was a sealed envelope. My name was on it in Mary's handwriting. My throat tightened as I broke the seal, hands trembling. Her words poured out in ink that had faded slightly with time, but every stroke carried her voice. She wrote about her worries, about Rachel and Harold, about whispers of lawsuits and fraud. And then she attached documents, legal records I had never seen before. Harold had once been sued for financial fraud. Rachel had covered for him, lied in court, and narrowly escaped charges herself. My son's wife and her father were not victims of hardship, as they claimed. They were predators, weaving stories of struggle to bleed us dry. I sank into Mary's old chair, clutching the letter to my chest. It felt like losing her all over again, but this time she had left me with a weapon. It was as if she had known this day would come. The woman I loved had carried the burden of this truth to protect me, and now it fell to me to act. The pain doubled, betrayal from my son, and the realization that Mary died carrying a secret so heavy. Tears blurred my eyes. I whispered into the air, "Mary, I'm sorry. I should have seen it sooner." That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, my chest heavy with grief. But slowly, through the fog of sorrow, something hardened inside me. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of strength return. I knew this wasn't just about saving property. This was about defending the truth. Mary left me. This was about refusing to let her sacrifices, and mine, become fuel for Harold and Rachel's schemes. I thought of the times I overlooked Rachel's manipulations, the times I let Harold's crocodile tears convince me he needed another loan. I thought of Michael standing by them, blind to their lies, and I felt anger rise like a tide. But beneath the anger was a new resolve. I realized I had a choice. I could sit in silence, let them strip me of everything, or I could fight. And this time, I wouldn't fight alone. I had Mary's letter. I had proof. I rose from bed, walked to the desk, and pulled out my phone. There were dozens of messages from Rachel, demands for money, requests for signatures, subtle threats disguised as sweet talk. One by one, I deleted them. With each swipe, I felt lighter, as if I was cutting ties to a chain I had carried too long. My hands no longer shook. They clenched into fists, steady and strong. I whispered to myself, "They think I'm weak. They're wrong." The house around me felt different now. The living room, once warm with family gatherings, now sat in silence. The old grandfather clock ticked in the corner. Its sound used to comfort me. Now it felt like a drumbeat counting down to a storm that was about to break. I looked at Mary's photograph on the mantel, her smile frozen in time. For a moment I almost heard her voice, soft and steady. "Don't let them take what we built." The familiar armchair where I used to sip coffee with her now felt like a throne of solitude, reminding me that I was alone in this fight. The curtains swayed with the evening breeze, but instead of comfort, they brought a chill. This home no longer carried only warmth, it carried the weight of betrayal. Every corner whispered of love turned sour, of trust broken, of a legacy in danger. But in that same silence, I found resolve. The room no longer weakened me, it sharpened me. The walls that once echoed laughter, now echoed a vow. I will not surrender. I will not let greed rewrite our family story. I pressed the letter flat on the table, smoothing the creases with care. Then I reached for the family safe and turned the dial. Click. The metal door swung open. Inside lay old deeds, savings bonds, and Mary's wedding ring. I placed the letter and documents inside, locking them away with a final turn. The sound of the lock clicking shut was like the sound of my heart hardening into purpose. This was no longer just grief. This was preparation. They thought they could push me into a corner, but they had forgotten I had lived through harder times. I had survived layoffs, recessions, and the death of the woman I loved most. And I was still standing. Rachel and Harold might think they hold all the cards, but they don't know about this letter. They don't know what Mary left me. I looked once more at her photo. My voice cracked as I whispered, "You gave me the truth. I'll use it. I'll protect what we built." Then I turned off the lamp, letting the room fall into darkness, my mind burning with determination. Tomorrow I will take the first step toward reclaiming my life, my home, and my dignity. Tonight I let the silence settle, not as a sign of defeat, but as the calm before a storm. I was ready to unleash. If you're still watching and find this story interesting, please comment one below to let me know you're here with me. The morning after I found Mary's letter, I woke with a different weight in my chest. It wasn't just grief anymore. It was a kind of fire I hadn't felt in years. For weeks, I had been stumbling through each day like an old man already halfway in the grave. But now, as I looked at the papers Mary left, something inside me shifted. They thought I was finished. They thought they could take what I built, push me into some nursing home, and strip me of dignity. But they were wrong. I showered, shaved, and put on the old navy blazer Mary always said made me look sharp. My hands didn't tremble as much as they had in recent weeks. My voice in the mirror didn't sound broken. For the first time since she passed, I looked like myself again. I picked up the phone and dialed the number of an attorney I had used years ago. A younger man now running the office answered, introducing himself as Mark Hastings. His voice was calm and professional, but there was a warmth that gave me the courage to explain my situation. I told him about the house, the accounts, the whispers of betrayal. Within an hour, I was sitting across from him in his office. The place smelled faintly of leather and coffee. Mark listened carefully, leaning forward, his pen scratching notes across a yellow pad. He didn't rush me, didn't dismiss me. When I showed him Mary's letter and the legal documents she had tucked away, he paused, adjusted his glasses, and looked me directly in the eye. "Mr. Thorne," he said, "you are doing the right thing. Don't let them rob you of a lifetime of work. We'll move to freeze any accounts they might be trying to access, and we'll secure the deed to your home so no one can push you out." Hearing those words was like hearing a bell ring inside my chest. A note of clarity. I nodded, my hand steady as I signed the forms he placed before me. I initialed page after page, authorizing him to act, giving him the power to protect what was mine. The pen felt solid between my fingers, not like the weak hands that had dropped bills in Rachel's palm just weeks earlier. Each signature was a promise, not just to myself, but to Mary. I whispered inside, "I'm fighting back, love." This time, I won't be silent. After leaving the attorney's office, I walked down Main Street to the bank. The late morning sun hit my face, and for the first time in months, I felt a little taller. Inside the bank, the air was cool, and the faint sound of printers and keyboards hummed around me. I asked to speak with the manager about securing my accounts. She came out, a woman in her 30s with kind eyes, and asked if I was doing all right. That simple question nearly broke me. "Are you doing all right?" From a stranger, when my own son hadn't asked me that in years. My throat tightened, but I managed to smile. "I will be," I said quietly. We sat in her office, and I explained what I needed. I told her about potential unauthorized withdrawals, about freezing access. She nodded firmly, pulling up the accounts on her screen. "There was an attempted withdrawal flagged just yesterday," she said, her eyebrows lifting. "Someone tried to move $20,000 from your savings into another account." My heart sank, but I stayed calm. I asked if she could secure everything under my sole authorization. She typed quickly, printed new forms, and slid them across to me. I signed without hesitation. For the first time in weeks, I felt the weight of control settle back in my hands. I wasn't helpless anymore. As I stood to leave, she touched my arm lightly and said, "You're stronger than you think. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." That one sentence from a stranger echoed louder than all the words Michael had spoken to me in years. Later that afternoon, Rachel and Harold invited me to their house. They said they had plans they wanted to share, and I knew it was another step in their campaign to take control. But this time, I was ready. I sat in their living room, a place that always smelled of store-bought candles and false pretenses. Harold leaned back in his chair, smug, while Rachel shuffled papers with Michael at her side. "Edward," Harold began, his voice smooth like oil, "we've been thinking. Rachel will manage the assets better. She's young, sharp, and knows what's best. You should rest. Let us take care of the heavy lifting." I said nothing. I simply nodded, watching him spread out spreadsheets across the coffee table. Michael glanced at me as if searching for approval, but I kept my face calm. Inside, I was raging. I wanted to scream, to grab him by the collar and ask how he could betray me so blindly. But I stayed quiet. I let Harold and Rachel keep talking, their arrogance growing with each word. Rachel pointed at the numbers. "With the house valued at $1.8 million, we can refinance and use part of that to fund new ventures." She spoke like a businesswoman at a board meeting, not a daughter-in-law speaking to her husband's father. And Michael, he just nodded along, swallowing her words like gospel. I watched and listened. Every sentence, every lie, every justification they gave dug them deeper into a hole they couldn't climb out of. They thought I was weak, that I was surrendering. They didn't realize I was documenting their arrogance in my mind, piece by piece, for the day it would all come crashing down. The moment that nearly broke me came when Harold gestured proudly toward a new television mounted on the wall. "Got this beauty for only $100, he chuckled. The screen stretched nearly the length of the wall, one of those massive 65-inch models, shining like a mirror. Michael's eyes widened. "Really? Only 100? I clenched my jaw so tight it hurt. I knew the truth. That TV cost closer to $1,800. I had seen the same model at the store last week when I was buying a replacement toaster. Harold lied effortlessly, baiting Michael with fantasies of easy deals, easy gains, easy wins, and my son believed him without question. The anger rose so hot in my chest I thought I might explode. My palms sweated, my heart pounded, but I forced myself to remain silent. I swallowed the fury, locking it deep inside, because I knew showing it now would give them satisfaction. Instead, I stared at that television until my vision blurred, and I promised myself silently, "Your lies will bury you, Harold. You won't bury me." To anyone watching, it might have looked like I was just an old man too tired to argue, but inside, it was a storm. That lie about the TV wasn't just about electronics. It was a symbol, a reminder that Harold and Rachel thrived on deception. And Michael? He was blind enough to follow. If you're listening to this and you've ever been in a room where the lies were so thick you could barely breathe, comment just one word: truth. Because in moments like this, the truth is the only thing that can save you. The following week, I returned to Mark's office. He greeted me with a firm handshake, his eyes sharp. "We've been digging," he said, sliding a file across the desk. I opened it and felt my stomach twist. It was a record of Harold's past. Lawsuits were filed against him years ago. One in particular stood out. He had been sued for embezzling $250,000 from a business partner. He had settled out of court, avoiding prison, but leaving a stain on his record. A stain he had buried deep, never mentioning it to anyone. "This is your ace," Mark said quietly. "With this, his credibility is destroyed. If he tries to claim guardianship or financial authority over you, this record will end him." I closed the file slowly, my hand steady. The fire inside me blazed brighter. Mary knew, I whispered to myself. She knew what kind of man he was. That night, I placed the file in my safe next to Mary's letter. 2 weapons, 2 truths. Together, they formed the shield I needed. The final straw that sealed my resolve came when Michael stopped by unannounced. He stood in the kitchen, awkward, his eyes darting to the safe in the corner as if he knew what was inside. "Dad," he began, "Rachel and I think it's time to talk about moving you into assisted living. It's for your own good. You'll have people around, meals, activities." I looked him straight in the eye, my voice calm, not trembling. "Michael, do you really believe this is for me? Or for you?" He froze. His lips parted, but no words came. For the first time, I saw uncertainty flicker across his face. I didn't press further. I let the silence stretch, heavy and suffocating. Then I walked past him, opened the safe, and slipped a set of papers inside, making sure he saw the lock turn. He didn't know what was in there, but he knew I was protecting something. That night, I sat at my desk and signed one last set of documents Mark had prepared, an updated power of attorney, a revised will, and a declaration that no transfer of property could occur without my consent. Each stroke of the pen felt like laying a brick in a fortress around me. As I finished, I leaned back and whispered into the empty room, "They think I lost, but the game's just begun." And deep down, I knew Chapter 4 would be the storm. If you're still watching and find this story interesting, please comment 2 below to let me know you're here with me. I set the dining room long table the way Mary used to, not with flowers or fancy silver, but with space. Space between chairs, space for the truth to land. The late afternoon light slid across the hardwood, thin and tired, and made dust glow in the air like drifting snow. I had opened the windows because the house felt tight in my chest, like it was holding its breath. The grandfather clock kept time in the corner. Tick. Pause. Tick. It sounded louder than usual, as if the room itself wanted witnesses. I could hear a car door slam outside, then another, then voices. Rachel's voice was clipped and bright. Harold's was loud, always a shade too cheerful. Michael spoke softly, the way he did when he wasn't sure of himself. I stood straighter, pressed my palms flat on the table, and reminded myself to breathe. This was my house. This was my meeting. This was the day the air would clear. They filed in as if they owned the place. Rachel led the way, perfume first, eyes scanning the room for angles. Harold walked behind her, already talking about how we could streamline things if we just agreed to his plan. Michael trailed, glancing at me, then looking down like a boy caught somewhere between 2 doors. No one sat until I gestured. I took the head of the table. They took the long side, facing me. The chairs made small scraping noises on the floor, a chorus of discomfort. The air felt warm and cramped even with the windows open. The clock ticked again. I folded my hands. I looked at each of them one by one. "We're going to settle this," I said. My voice was steady. I was glad for that. I started small because lies like theirs travel on little feet. "Rachel," I said, "do you remember the wine you poured last month? The bottle with the gold label?" She smiled too fast. "Of course, a gift," she said. "Only $70, though. We never buy anything expensive." I nodded and placed a store receipt on the table. The numbers were clear, the date circled. $70 plus tax. The total line was a line of ink like a little cut. "A gift that you bought," I said. "On my son's card." She opened her mouth, closed it, then rolled her eyes toward Harold. "It was a dinner," she said, slow and patient, like she was explaining something to a child. "We hosted. You were our guest." I set down the second receipt. A seafood spread, that same week. Lobster tails, imported shrimp, specialty cheeses, $450, and some change. "You told Michael you couldn't cover the power bill," I said. "You told him you were late on rent." Harold's smile thinned until it looked like a painted line. Michael's shoulders sagged a little. He looked at the receipt and then back at his hands. I did not press. I did not raise my voice. I knew from long years at the bakery and from longer years of marriage that you do not win anything by shouting. You win by putting fact beside fact until the table sags under the weight. One more thing, I said, just to test the math. I turned to Michael. Son, do you have your wallet? He blinked. He did. He pulled it out and flipped it open. There were 2 worn 20s and a tired credit card peeking from the slot. You doing all right? I asked quietly. The question hung there. He glanced at Rachel, then looked back at me and shrugged. I'm fine, Hoser, he said, too fast. I didn't move. Tell me the number. He stared at the table. 3,000, he said. On the card. Harold lifted his water glass and hid a smile in the rim. Rachel cut air with her hand like the conversation was an inconvenience. The room tilted. My throat tightened. It was like watching a man drown while someone else steals his life jacket. It hit me in a place deeper than anger. The clock ticked again. That made it worse. The sound felt like a hammer. I let the quiet work. It pressed on their faces and left little dents. Then I exhaled and straightened and did what I had come here to do. Before we go further, I said, I want to make sure we all agree on one thing. This house is mine. It has been mine for decades. I paid for it. I repaired it. I kept it even when keeping it meant skipping vacations and overtime hours that turned my bones old. This home is not a number. It is a life. And the bakery is not a spreadsheet. It is a name. My wife's family recipes are not assets. They are a promise. If we can agree on that, we can talk. Rachel shifted in her chair. We respect that, she said. All honey. We just want to help you manage things. Harold nodded, his ring tapping the table like a small drum. We brought plan, he said. He slid out a folder thick with printouts, charts, colored bars, the kind of pictures people use when they want to make their greed look like science. I did not touch the papers. I did not ask one question. I let them talk. They were ready for a fight. They were not ready for a silence. Rachel pointed to a chart that showed the house as a lever. She smiled while she said it. A lever to release cash. A lever to free up equity. A lever to move me out and move money in. She described a refinance like it was a gift basket. Harold explained that managing my accounts would be a kindness to me. He said the word kindness twice, like he wanted to hear how it sounded in the room. Michael nodded in rhythm with their sentences, as if he could shake doubt off if he moved his head enough. I kept my hands flat. I kept my voice low. I appreciate the effort, I said, but I have plans of my own. Rachel laughed a little. It was the kind of laugh people use when they think you're being cute. Of course, she said, but we've got experience. Harold leaned in. It's simple, he said. You sign here, and we take care of everything. He tapped a line with his finger, casual, like a dealer pushing a card across green felt. I looked at that line for a long second, not because I was tempted, but because I wanted to feel, for one last time, the old pull of giving in. Then I looked up and let my voice carry, not loud, but clear. No, I said. Harold blinked. Rachel froze, her pen held above the paper like a tiny flag. Michael stared at me. No, I said again, and I felt something lift from my shoulders. This is not your decision to make. It will never be your decision to make. There was a knock at the door. The sound startled all of us. The clock answered with another tick. I rose slowly. The hallway smelled like lemon oil and old photographs. When I opened the door, Margaret stood on the porch in her Sunday best, hair fixed, hands clasped around a small notebook. She had lived next door for 30 years. She had carried casseroles to Mary when the chemo made her too tired to cook. She had watched Michael learn to drive and had called me when he hit our mailbox. She smiled, polite, but her eyes were steady. "You asked me to stop by," she said. "If it's a bad time—" "It's the right time," I said. I let her in. Her heels clicked softly on the floor. In the dining room, Margaret kept her voice gentle. She looked at me, not at the others. "I just wanted to say," she said, "you have been sharp as a tack these last months. I've seen you take the trash out at 6 on the dot, same as always. I've watched you fix your fence. I see your lights go on and off at the same hours. You're managing. You're steady." She touched my arm just for a second. "And you're strong." Rachel stared at the ceiling like she was counting cobwebs. Harold folded his arms and leaned back, making his chair creak. Michael looked embarrassed, like kindness made his skin itch. But I felt the words land exactly where they needed to. A witness matters. A neighbor, especially when the family pretends not to notice. Another knock. I did not look at Rachel this time. I walked the hall again, past the framed photos of Christmases and graduations. When I opened the door, Mark stood there in his navy suit, a briefcase in one hand and a manila envelope in the other. He had the same calm look he had in the office, the one that told me we were not improvising. We were executing. He stepped inside, greeted everyone by name, and sat without fuss. The clock ticked for him, too. He started like any lawyer would, slow and careful. He thanked me for inviting him. He said he had brought documents that might help clarify things. Rachel's eyes lit up, quick and greedy. "Wonderful," she said. "We've brought documents, too." Harold laughed, a little forced. Mark smiled that polite smile lawyers use in courtrooms and living rooms. He opened his envelope and slid out a letter on bank letterhead. The paper was bright white. It looked clean and official and heavy. He placed it in front of me, then placed copies in front of the three across the table. "This letter," he said, "confirms that all personal banking accounts belonging to Mr. Thorne have been secured under his sole authorization. Any attempt to withdraw or transfer funds without his written consent is blocked." He let that sit for one breath, then another. "It also acknowledges a flagged attempt to move $20,000 last week," he said, almost as an afterthought. "That attempt did not succeed." Rachel flushed dark and then pale. Harold pushed his chair back and stood up, then sat down again, his ring tapping the wood faster now. Michael swallowed and reached for a glass of water, which he did not drink. I folded my hands to keep from shaking. This was the bridge from last week to this one, from fear to fact. This was Chapter 3's phone calls made flesh on paper. Mark did not let the quiet get stale. He pulled out a second set of documents with a simple title, Durable Power of Attorney. He spoke as if he were reading a recipe, calm, step by step. "These are the updated powers and directives," he said. "They were executed and notarized. Mr. Thorne retains all authority over his property, his health directives, and his business decisions. There are no co-signers. There are no default successors. Any previous drafts are revoked." He paused and looked at me, waiting for my nod. I gave it. My hand was steady now. My chest felt wider. The room felt less like a trap and more like a stage. Rachel's smile came back, but it didn't touch her eyes. "We just want what's best," she said. "You know that." Harold recovered his easy voice and said something about protecting value. Michael tried to say my name, but the word died in his mouth. Mark did not argue with them. He did not need to. He reached into the envelope one more time and placed a brown, worn item on the table. Not paper. Wood. The little box Mary had left me. I had given it to Mark that morning. He rested his fingertips on the lid like a minister resting them on the good book. He nodded to me. I opened it. The letter with my name on it lay inside, and next to it, photocopies of court filings, case numbers printed like fingerprints. I took a breath that tasted like lemon oil and old grief. Then I read only one sentence from Mary, just one, because I did not want to make a show of her pain. "If they come for what we built," she had written, "tell the truth and do not be afraid." I looked up and met Harold's eyes. Then I slid the copies across to him and to Rachel. "You have a past," I said, "a legal one, a costly one." Harold glanced at the page and went white in a way that scared me a little. It was a cold white, not a frightened white. He looked at Rachel, then at Michael, then back at me. "Old business," he said. "Settled business." Rachel snapped, "That was years ago." Her voice was too loud for the room. Michael looked from one face to the other, like a child in a storm. Mark kept the tone even. "A civil suit for embezzling $250,000, he said. From a partner who trusted you. Settled out of court." He slid the printout again like a dealer laying down a trump card. "You didn't go to jail," he said. "But you didn't clear your name either." Harold tried to laugh, and the sound came out wrong. "This is irrelevant," he said. "We're here about the house. We're here because he needs help." Mark nodded. "We are here about the house," he said, and tapped the deed copy with his pen. "And about a pattern. The court calls it a pattern when stories repeat with new victims." Rachel slammed her palm on the table. The glasses rattled. The clock ticked once, steady as ever. "We are family," she said. "You cannot talk about us like that." I looked at Michael. He didn't look back. His face had gone slack, as if the muscles wouldn't answer. I did not shout. I did not accuse. I spoke the way Mary would have, careful and final. "Family doesn't lie about money," I said. "Family doesn't use words like lever when they mean home. Family doesn't tell a man who buried his wife that he should sign papers he didn't read. Family doesn't spend $450 on seafood and call their father to say the lights might go off." I could feel the heat go out of my face as I spoke. It was not anger anymore. It was relief. Mark lifted one last document from the envelope and laid it down like a cornerstone. The title was simple: Last Will and Testament. I had read every line with him that morning. I had signed it. He had stamped it with a notary and filed a copy with the county. He looked to me again, and I nodded again. He turned the first page toward the three across the table. "Mr. Thorne has updated his will," he said. "The house, appraised at approximately $1.8 million, and the business, valued at around $12 million, are placed into a community trust that will fund scholarships, food programs, and veteran services in this county. Michael receives a personal stipend and a modest share restricted to housing and health care. No lump sum transfers. No management rights." He closed the folder without drama. "Everything is legal. Everything is filed." Rachel's mouth opened and no sound came out. Then the words burst like steam. "You can't do this," she said, and then louder, "You can't do this." Harold's chair screeched back. He stood and paced in a tight little line, tugging at his cuff. "After all we've done," Rachel cried, "after everything we planned to do for you." Her voice thinned on the last words. The act was fraying. Michael finally looked at me fully, and what I saw there will sit in my ribs for a long time. Confusion, hurt, a little boy who had been told a story and was realizing the ending was false. He started to speak. He stopped. He started again. "Dad," he said, just that word, like a question he couldn't form. I did not flinch. "I am not punishing you," I said. "I am protecting what your mother and I built. I am honoring her letter." I looked at Harold and then at Rachel. "And I am protecting you," I added to Michael, which felt strange to say, but felt true. Because money that comes with lies comes with chains. Harold tried a new tactic. He softened his voice, made his eyes look wet. All we wanted was to help you in your last years, he said, to make sure you had comfort. He set a hand on his chest like a politician. We were doing what any good family would do. Mark lifted his brows just enough to register disbelief. Margaret cleared her throat lightly. Good families don't try to move $20,000 from a man's account without asking, she said. Good families bring casseroles and sit in silence and listen. It was the only time she raised her voice all evening. It sounded like a bell far away on a winter morning. Rachel spun toward Michael. Say something, she snapped. Tell him we deserve to manage this. Tell him. Michael did not move. Harold grabbed the folder of charts and shoved it toward Mark. These plans are solid, he said. Any bank would agree. Mark's voice stayed even. A bank already disagreed, he said. They froze access. They issued a letter. He tapped the first letter again, and the crisp paper made a sound like a slap on the table. Rachel's face flamed. You set us up, she hissed at me, and then she turned on Harold. You said this was handled. You said the bank wouldn't notice. Harold glared at her. And you said you had him convinced. You said he'd sign. The words weren't loud, but they were sharp. They cut the room into little pieces. The alliance cracked in front of us, not with a bang, just a steady splitting like old wood under strain. I could have spoken then. I could have pressed them. I could have listed every kindness that went unpaid, every lie I had swallowed. But the house had heard enough. The clock ticked again, steady and sure. I turned to Michael and kept my voice soft. I know you thought you were helping, I said. I know you have been listening to the wrong voices. He stared at the floor. I didn't know about... He gestured toward the documents, toward the box, toward the past he had not asked about. I didn't know. His voice cracked on the last word and made him sound 12 again. Rachel slammed her hand down one more time, a little weaker. This is madness, she said. You're not thinking clearly. I met her eyes. I have never been more clear, I said. You thought I was weak. Now you see the cost. The words left my mouth and floated there between us. They landed on the table with all the papers, receipts, and court stamps. They stayed. Mark gathered the documents into neat stacks. He did not hurry. He did not fumble. He looked at me and asked if I wanted him to read the closing clause. I nodded. He read the lines that made everything final. He read the lines about the trust. He read the part where I asked that the house be kept for community events until my passing, and then sold with proceeds going to the programs Mary would have chosen. He read my words, in ink, made real by seals and signatures. Each sentence felt like a door clicking shut behind us, shutting out the wind. Rachel stood up so fast her chair tipped and clattered. She didn't pick it up. I won't accept this, she said. We won't accept this. Harold patted the air as if that could push the facts back into the envelope. We'll contest, he said. We'll find a judge. Mark nodded, politely. You can try, he said, but there is nothing to contest. The bank's letter is clear. The will is valid. The records of prior conduct are public. He rested his hands on the closed folder and looked at them the way a carpenter looks at a finished piece of work. Not smug, just done. They walked to the door without looking at me. Rachel muttered to Michael that they would talk later. Harold brushed past Margaret without apology. Michael lingered like a man on a dock when the boat had already pushed away. He put his hand on the table as if to steady himself. Dad, he said again. I waited. I need time. I nodded. Take it, I said, but take it without them. He flinched like the words stung. Then he left. The house went very quiet, the kind of quiet that fills your ears like wool. The last light slid off the floor, and the room darkened around the edges. Margaret squeezed my shoulder and said she was proud of me. Her voice made my eyes burn. Mark said he would file a final notice in the morning and that he was a phone call away. He gathered his briefcase, shook my hand, and said something I will remember for a long time. "You didn't win because you had a lawyer," he said. "You won because you told the truth, and you prepared." Then he left too, and I was alone with the clock. I walked to the mantel and picked up Mary's photograph. I held it close until my breath fogged the glass. "We did it," I whispered. "I did what you asked." I put the photo back and sat down and let my shoulders drop for the first time in weeks. The house felt wider. The air felt cleaner. Outside, a car started somewhere and drove away. Inside, the clock kept perfect time. Tick, pause, tick. The sound did not press on my chest anymore. It sounded like a heartbeat. The phone buzzed on the table. A text from an unknown number flashed and disappeared. Then another. I turned the phone over so the screen faced the wood. I wanted the quiet. I needed the quiet. In that quiet, I pictured the scholarship letters being written years from now. I pictured a boy with a strong back getting a chance because the bakery's profits helped him. I pictured a woman at the food pantry walking home with a bag that was a little heavier. I pictured a veteran sitting with his coffee in a warm hall built from the house that had held my life. The images filled the room like sunlight in spring after a long winter. I stood and closed the windows one by one. The air cooled. Somewhere in the neighborhood, a dog barked, someone laughed, and a screen door creaked shut. Ordinary sounds. Good sounds. I cleaned the table slowly, stacking papers, wiping away the faint ring a glass had left. When I picked up the bank letter, I ran my finger over the embossed logo and felt how real it was. When I lifted the will, I felt the weight of the pages. Real things. Not promises, not talk, not charts colored with plans to move me out of my own life. I carried the box back to the safe. The metal was cold on my palm. The lock turned with that same clean click that makes a person stand a little taller. I set the box inside and closed the door. My reflection wavered on the dull steel. I looked old. I am old. But behind the lines I could see the man Mary knew, the one who could lift 100-pound bag of flour and set it down without breaking it open, the one who could stir a batter just right by feel, the one who could start over when a loaf collapsed. Strong enough. Not because he was never hurt, because he kept standing. I walked back to the dining room and turned off the light. I stood a moment in the doorway and took one last look at the chairs. The one at the head would be mine until I chose otherwise. The others could sit or go, but they would not decide for me. I closed the door, and the latch made a small sound, like a period at the end of a sentence. If you have ever sat at your own table and felt people treat you like a problem to solve instead of a person to love, you know the ache that lives in the ribs after a night like this. It is a dull ache that flares bright when a stranger shows more care than your own blood. It is a heavy ache that lifts just a little when the truth finally speaks out loud. I felt that lift as I climbed the stairs. I felt it as I turned down the bed. I felt it as I lay on my side and listened to the house breathe. They will talk, I know. They will say I am cruel. They will say I forgot what family means. They will say the money should have stayed in the bloodline. But I remember what Mary wrote. Tell the truth and do not be afraid. I followed that line to the letter. I built a wall of facts. I called in the people who knew me. I faced the people who didn't. I kept my voice. I kept my name. I kept my home. Tomorrow, there will be paperwork to file and calls to return. Tomorrow, there may be angry messages waiting for me or silence. Tomorrow, the bakery will open on time if I have anything to say about it, because the ovens do not care about drama, only about heat, dough, and patience. Tomorrow, I will brew coffee and sit with the morning sun and look at the backyard Mary loved, and I will let the peace of a good decision settle deeper. Tonight, I just let the victory be quiet. No fireworks, no speeches, just a man and a clock and a house that still belongs to him. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it sighs. If you heard the part where they laughed while my son admitted there was only $40 in his wallet and $3,000 on his card, and your hands tightened like mine did. If you saw the smug tilt of a glass and wondered how people forget the difference between love and leverage, then you know this pain. It is hard, isn't it? If you believe every person deserves dignity and deserves to be heard and deserves to keep what they built with honest hands, comment one word: dignity. Now watch what they do when they realize the old man still holds the line, and the next chapter is already in motion. If you're still watching and find this story interesting, please comment 3 below to let me know you're here with me. The house was quiet after they left. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't feel restful, but hollow, like the echo of voices that had just filled the walls with anger. I walked to the mantel and placed Mary's photo back in its place. For a long moment, I just stood there, breathing in the silence. The storm had passed, but the wreckage was still scattered inside me. I could still hear Rachel's voice rising, Harold's ring tapping the wood, Michael's broken word, "Dad!" The memories swirled like smoke, but the truth was steady. I had stood my ground. I hadn't let them take me down. The very next morning, I met with Mark to finalize everything. His office smelled of coffee and paper, a simple smell that reminded me of steady work and real progress. He placed the last of the filed documents on the desk, tapping the pages as he explained. The will is recorded. The accounts are secured. The house transfer to the community trust is complete. There is nothing they can do now. I signed the confirmation forms, each signature a nail sealing the coffin of their schemes. When I finished, I sat back in the chair and let out a long breath I didn't know I had been holding. "It's done," I whispered. Mark nodded. "Yes, it's done." 2 weeks later, I sold the house. The appraiser valued it at a little over $1.8 million, just as we had thought. A young couple with 2 children walked through the halls during the showing, their little girl running her hand along the banister that Michael had once slid down as a boy. I felt a pang in my chest, sharp and bittersweet, but instead of grief, it brought me peace. The house would be lived in, filled again with noise that wasn't anger, but laughter. I signed the papers and handed over the keys. That night, I slept in my new place, a small cabin by the lake, purchased for $200,000. It was modest, but when I opened the curtains the next morning, the water shimmered in the sunlight. Ducks floated near the reeds. The air smelled like pine. For the first time in years, I felt light. The cabin became more than a home. It became a sanctuary. I planted tomatoes in the little garden patch out back, something Mary had always wanted to do, but we never found time for. I bought an old rocking chair for the porch. I started walking each morning around the lake, nodding to other early risers, who soon became familiar faces. Margaret came by sometimes with muffins. Mark checked in to make sure I was eating well. Even the bank manager wrote me a card, just to say she admired my courage. The kindness of strangers warmed me more than the hollow promises of family. I realized then that peace doesn't come from keeping everyone close. Sometimes peace comes from closing the door and locking it. Rachel vanished from my life. She didn't call. She didn't write. Neighbors told me she had moved to an apartment across town after Harold's legal troubles caught up with him. The lawsuit that had been tucked away in the past came roaring back when his former partner discovered he was scheming again. I heard he was being sued for damages and might even face charges this time. Rachel stood by him at first, but cracks appeared. They were seen arguing in public. She was overheard saying she regretted ever tying her future to a liar. It didn't surprise me. Greed binds people together, but only until it snaps. Michael, my son? He tried to reach out. A short text, then another. One night, late, he left a voicemail. His voice was low, almost broken. "Dad, I'm sorry. I didn't know. I didn't see it. I should have listened." I sat with the phone in my hand, staring at the screen. My thumb hovered over the callback button. For a moment, I wanted to hear his voice again, but then I remembered the weight of his silence when Harold and Rachel spoke for him. I remembered how quickly he nodded when they lied, and I remembered Mary's letter. Tell the truth, and do not be afraid. The truth was simple. I did not need his apology. I needed peace. So I deleted the voicemail. "I don't need their words," I whispered into the empty cabin. "I have myself." With the money from the sale of the business and the house, I created the Thorn Foundation. $12 million are dedicated to scholarships for underprivileged students in this county. Another portion is set aside for veteran services and food banks. When I signed the documents with the foundation director, she asked me why I was giving so much away. I smiled and said, "Better my money builds futures than feeds greed." She wrote it down as if it were a quote worth remembering. To me, it was just common sense. I began volunteering at the Veterans Hall on Wednesdays, brewing coffee and listening to men my age tell stories about their service. Some of them were alone like me, and we found comfort in sitting together. On Saturdays, I brought my guitar to the orphanage downtown. The children loved to strum the strings, their small fingers fumbling over chords. One boy, about 8 years old, asked me to teach him a song. His eyes shone as he plucked a simple melody, and when he got it right, he grinned as if he'd been handed the world. Moments like that healed places in me I thought would never mend. One afternoon, as I was leaving the orphanage, a small boy ran up and grabbed my hand. His hand was warm, his fingers sticky from candy. He looked up at me with bright eyes and said, "Thank you, Grandpa Ed." The words pierced me deeper than any apology from my own blood ever could. My chest tightened, but this time it wasn't pain. It was gratitude. I bent down, ruffled his hair, and whispered, "I don't need them anymore. I have myself and new family." Rachel and Harold's world collapsed further. Harold was forced to sell his car to pay legal fees. Rachel took a job she hated. Their names became whispers in courtrooms and side conversations at grocery stores. People crossed the street to avoid them. Their arrogance was gone, replaced by bitterness. They sent one letter, unsigned, but in Rachel's handwriting. It was an apology of sorts, full of excuses, blaming stress, blaming Harold, blaming desperation. I tore it in half and threw it in the fire. I didn't need their words. Forgiveness wasn't a gift I needed to hand them. Forgiveness was something I gave myself by not letting their poison live inside me anymore. As the weeks passed, I settled into a rhythm. Morning walks, gardening, guitar lessons, evenings by the lake, watching the sun melt into the water. Sometimes Margaret joined me on the porch, bringing iced tea and stories of her grandchildren. Sometimes I sat alone, listening to the crickets, feeling Mary's presence in the breeze. Each day was a reminder that I had chosen right. Each day was proof that dignity and peace are worth more than money or false loyalty. The lessons became clear to me, sharp and undeniable. For parents, I realized, love must always come with boundaries. We give, yes, but we cannot give so much that we lose ourselves. We cannot buy gratitude. For children, I saw the truth in Michael's downfall. Greed blinds you. It makes you lose everything, even the people who once stood beside you. And for humanity as a whole, I understood that character is the only real wealth. Not houses, not bank accounts, not titles. Character. It's the one inheritance no one can steal, and the one legacy that outlives every will. One evening, as I rocked on the porch, the lake glowing pink in the sunset, I thought to myself, I finally found where I belong. The cabin wasn't big, it wasn't grand, but it was mine, and it was free of lies. Each tomato sprouting in the garden, each song strummed on the guitar, each handshake at the Veterans Hall proved that life wasn't ending for me. It was beginning again in a simpler, purer way. One small surprise came in the mail a month later. A letter from an old friend I hadn't seen in decades who had read about the scholarship fund in the local paper. He wanted to reconnect, to thank me for helping the community. His words reminded me that when you step into the light of truth, others see you more clearly too. It wasn't a conflict. It was a connection, a gentle reminder that life keeps offering new doors if we have the courage to walk through them. That same week, as I carried groceries from the market, a little girl tugged at my sleeve and handed me a wildflower she had picked. She smiled, then ran back to her mother without a word. I held that flower all the way home, set it in a glass of water, and thought, the world is still full of kindness. The world is still worth trusting. I closed my eyes that night and whispered into the darkness, I am free. And I believed it. So, I leave you with this. Family isn't the ones who share your blood if they poison your heart. Family is the ones who respect you, who honor you, who shows up with casseroles, muffins, or a wildflower plucked by a child's hand. Money fades, houses crumble, but dignity stays. And now I ask you, listening, what lesson from this story speaks to you the most? Was it about the boundaries parents must set, the gratitude children should hold, or the truth that character is the only wealth that matters? Comment on the lesson that touched you so we can share and learn together. The story has come to an end. I hope it has brought you valuable lessons and insights. If you enjoyed this content, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next video. Goodbye, and see you again.